Have you ever heard a German phrase that just made you stop and go, wait, what? Something that, if you translate it literally, sounds totally bizarre? Well, today we're going to crack one of the most common mysteries in German grammar. Why exactly do Germans feel themselves?
To get to the bottom of this, let's follow the story of a guy named Ralph Gruber. He's at a simple doctor's visit, but it's right here that our little grammar puzzle begins.
So Ralph's doctor, a Frau Dr. Schmetterling, starts things off with this question. Now, if you translate that word for word, she's asking him, "So then, Mr. Gruber, how do you feel yourself?"
Which is a weird question, right? How do you feel yourself? Is she asking about his self-esteem or something? That seems a little too deep for a routine checkup. What is going on here? And Ralph's answer doesn't help at all. In fact, it just makes things weirder. He says, "For a week, I feel myself awful." He's using that same strange structure. So this isn't some mistake. It's actually a core piece of German grammar that we're about to unlock.
Okay, so here's the secret. The key to this whole puzzle is a special kind of verb. They're called reflexive verbs, and they're all about actions that, in a way, turn back on themselves. So the big idea is this. A reflexive verb is for an action that the subject does to itself. Think of it like a boomerang. The action starts with the subject, it goes out, and then it comes right back. It's a feature in languages like German that really like to be super clear about who's getting the action, even when it seems obvious to us.
Yeah, this visual nails it perfectly. The subject, I, does an action, feel, and that action just loops right back onto I. It's a closed circuit, a totally self-contained action. And this is a great way to see the difference. With a regular verb like see, the action goes outward, right? It hits an object, the dog. But with a reflexive verb, the action of feeling is pointed right back at the person doing it, mich, or myself.
Now, to make this all work, you've got to have the right tools for the job, and those tools are the reflexive pronouns. The key is they have to match the subject. So ich always goes with mich, du always goes with dich, and so on. You can think of this table as your essential cheat sheet.
And trust me, once you know what to look for, you will see these verbs everywhere, especially with daily routines. In German, you don't just shower, you shower yourself. You don't just get dressed, you dress yourself. Once you spot the pattern, it actually starts to feel totally normal.
Okay, so we've got the what and the why down. Let's jump into the how. Let's see how these things actually build into real sentences, especially when German decides to get a little tricky.
Because, just when you think you've got a handle on it, German throws a curveball: separable prefixes. These are tiny little bits at the front of a verb that actually break off and fly to the very end of the sentence. They're like little add-ons that can change the verb's whole meaning.
But hey, don't sweat it. There's a simple recipe to follow. The reflexive pronoun, in this case mich, always snuggles in right after the main part of the verb. Everything else kind of falls into place, with that pesky little prefix getting booted all the way to the end.
So let's check back in with Ralph. After his doctor's appointment, he pops into a shop. The clerk asks if he needs help, and Ralph might say this: "Ich sehe mich nur ein bisschen um." I'm just looking around. See? You've got the subject, the verb, the reflexive pronoun, and that prefix, right at the very end. Perfect. Now, here's a fun German quirk. They love to start a sentence with the time element to really emphasize it. When that happens, the verb stubbornly holds on to that critical second spot, which means the subject has to move over. But look what doesn't budge: the reflexive pronoun. It stays tucked in right after the verb-subject pair. So what about questions? Well, guess what? The same basic rules apply. For a WH question, the question word is first, then the verb. For a yes or no question, like one Dr. Schmetterling might ask Rolf, the verb actually kicks off the whole sentence. But in both cases, the subject and the reflexive pronoun are still sticking together like glue. All right, deep breaths. We've tackled verbs, prefixes, and word order. Are you ready for the final boss level? This is where every single piece we've talked about comes together in the most German way imaginable.
Okay, here's the scenario. What on earth do you do when your reflexive verb isn't in a nice simple sentence, but it's buried inside a dependent clause? One of those phrases that starts with a word like that, because, or if.
You just have to remember one golden rule for this. In a German dependent clause, the main conjugated verb gets punted to the very, very end of the line. Every single time, no exceptions.
And this example right here shows you exactly how that works. Doctor's orders for Ralph were to rest. So he calls his wife and tells her, Ich verspreche, dass ich mich morgen erhole. See? In the main sentence, the verb erhole is in position 2. But that little word das, that, triggers the dependent clause rule and bam! Erhole gets shoved all the way to the end.
Okay, you ready for the grand finale? We're going to combine everything we've learned, a reflexive verb, a separable prefix, and we're going to stick it all inside a dependent clause that also happens to be an indirect question. Let's just take it slow. And here it is, a true specimen of grammatical beauty. Do you know where you will be staying yourself in Austrian next year? Just look at that. The verb is sich aufhalten. The prefix auf, which is normally separate, has actually rejoined the main verb hältst, and the whole package aufhältst is sitting at the very, very end. That is some peak German sentence structure right there.
So, there you have it. When a German says, Ich fühle mich gut, they aren't getting all philosophical on you, they're just using a reflexive verb to say, I feel good, because the action of feeling reflects back on them. Now that you've unlocked this little mystery, what other weird-sounding phrases have you heard out there that you want us to break down?